Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. As some of you know, I'm a little nervous, so I'm a practitioner, not necessarily a pontificator. So, yeah, feel free to ask questions along the way. And I'd like to start today, and for the next 30 minutes, we're going to be talking about onboarding, that critical phase of customer success. And I'd actually like to start with, oops, I'm not sure this clicker is working. Oh, there we go. I'd like to start with the real customer escalation that really chills a CEO's heart. You talk about blood boiling. So this is a real email from one of our customers that signed last year. I think it was the same day we signed them. Forward, who can I call? Forwarded to me, the CEO. I want to get started. I'm not happy. I've gone an entire day without hearing from anyone. Please see below. Apparently, the sales rep was out of town. I would like to get started, at least understand next steps. So lots of fails here and the kind of emails that keep me up at night. We probably didn't set expectations before the sale. We didn't nail that handoff, and now the customer's first experience with us has been negative. And our goal for the next 30 minutes is to make sure none of us ever receive an email like this again. So let's talk a little bit about onboarding. And this is really between the sign and the go live, as Brad talked about earlier. And we're here today because I think we're all customer-focused leaders. And intuitively, we understand onboarding is that critical time when a customer's expectations, which have been set during the sales process, start to meet that reality of product and service delivery. The customer, they are incredibly engaged when they've just signed with you. It's day one, they're ready to go. They've probably been waiting for their procurement team to get their act together, and finally they can get started on the path to success. But for us as vendors, I like to say it's 364 days to renewal. And that clock is ticking to get the customer as quickly as possible to adoption, value, and eventually success. So onboarding is the time to make your customer successful. On the flip side, it's also an opportunity to massively disappoint if not handled correctly. And when you get emails like the one I got just on the slide before this, you might never recover that customer relationship. And in fact, poor onboarding is the most frequent cause of churn. This is a study from a recent customer success organization, followed by the product underperforming, ineffective relationship building, and then overselling is number 4. So this should scare you if you're a customer success leader. Think about that. On average, 1 in 4 of your new customers is going to walk away primarily because they had a poor onboarding experience. So, knowing how important onboarding is, here's what we're going to cover today. So first, we will establish 3 different customer onboarding models. So as I'm going through that part, think about which is appropriate for your product, customer, and business type. Second, we're going to define phases, milestones, and measurements. So this is going to be super tactical. I'm going to use my own company, Skilljar, as an example. We've probably rebooted onboarding 3 times. And then finally, we're going to identify some specific and effective tactics for success. So if you're just getting started, it'll be a good place to get some ideas. And so first, why me? Why am I here talking about onboarding? So I founded Skilljar in 2013. Our mission is to help companies create beautiful training experiences backed by data. And we focus specifically on customer onboarding, training, and certification, mostly software companies. So some of our customers include Verizon, Cisco, Tableau, Autodesk. And as a company that really focuses on customer success, that experience with our customers is really important to us. And I'm actually very happy to report that in our last customer survey, 100% of new customers reported that their onboarding experience with us was excellent or very good. So if you don't measure that, you definitely should. Additionally, because we are investing so much here, we hired our VP of Customer Success, Pam Dodrell, within our first 25 hires. Does anybody know Pam, by the way? So she was formerly the VP of CS at ServiceMax, before that at Zendesk. So in her own words, really thrilled to come in at a stage of company where she can set the right foundation and not come in later to fix mistakes or just process renewals or put out fires, and some of you may be familiar with. And before Skilljar, I actually led seller onboarding for Amazon Marketplace in the third-party business. So I've seen both kind of very scalable, global, low-touch onboarding, as well as the onboarding experiences we've had and that our customers offer. So with that, let's start with the 3 different customer onboarding models. So the first step in designing a great onboarding experience is to figure out what fits your customer and product type. So I like to use the analogy of getting dinner. We've all done this. In the self-service world, you are going to do everything on your own, probably not talk to another human being. You're Googling for a recipe, going to the grocery store, doing the cooking and the cleanup. In the low-touch model, so think of this like a taco truck. You might have a few different options, veggie, chicken, and beef, but you're still doing a lot on your own. The options are limited. There's no place to sit. Maybe it's cash only. Maybe you're bringing your own water. So finally, there's high touch. So, you're at a great restaurant, 4-star restaurant, best menu and service, valet parking, organic, local, gluten-free, super high touch, high quality experience. So take a second, maybe think about which of these models fits your customer and product. I'll ask for a show of hands shortly. So bringing it back to the tech world, what are some examples? So in self-service, sometimes this is called tech touch, typically a very simple product targeted towards a very large number of users, free, freemium, or low ARR, ACV, and contract value, often seen in consumer products, but also dev tools. A lot of developers like to get started on their own. Examples might be, buying a domain name from GoDaddy, or signing up for a Spotify subscription, or in the case of Amazon, signing up to be a seller on Amazon. Very self-service, transactional things. Curious in this room, let's show of hands, how many people identify with this model? Couple. And I'm not surprised. I was anticipating that we would slant more towards the high-touch models here. So in low touch, we start to see a little bit more complexity and friction in adoption. Maybe you have several types of users, like an administrator and an end user of your product. You might have different levels of functionality, so the getting started, but maybe advanced functionality with reports or advanced features. It's typically seen in small teams or small businesses. So some examples here really come from the sales and marketing world. So maybe using Google AdWords for the first time, or implementing e-signature in Salesforce. So these are all things that require some specialized knowledge, but far less than, say, a full CRM implementation. So how many people here really identify more with the low-touch model? Okay, a couple hands. So which brings us to high touch. And this model really aligns with products and businesses that are introducing new behaviors or new ways of doing business. An example might be, when Google Glass first came out and being used in the operating rooms and by surgeons. That's a totally new way of doing something with also an additional level of risk. There might be an implementation or a high-risk migration involved, so think about changing out an ERP or an accounting system. You really don't want to do that self-service. The more stakeholders are involved, the more touches are necessary, and sometimes even a full-blown project manager to help oversee the implementation. Not surprisingly, high touch is aligned more with those enterprise customers. They're often expecting and even paying for onboarding services as part of that initial sale. So hopefully you identify most strongly with one of these models, and some of you might be thinking, hey, I have customers in all of these categories. That's totally okay, common, especially for SaaS companies. We certainly have both low-touch and high-touch customers. And think of this as a segmentation issue. Which of these is your priority customer base, and so which model are you going to work on first? And I think where companies run into challenges is when there is a misalignment between what you think your customer wants and how they actually behave in implementing your product. Everybody wants to scale, but not every product is self-service or even low touch. And there's also, on the flip side, a perception that higher touch is always higher quality, and that's not the case if that's not what your customer wants or needs. So after you've identified one of these onboarding models, the next step is to understand the phases and milestones within onboarding as part of that customer journey. And for this, I'll use my own company, Skilljar, as an example. I am kind of like exposing all of our dirty laundry to this group, but we've worked on this several times, and it is a process. We follow high-touch onboarding, but whatever your onboarding model, the same principles should apply. And it has taken us a couple years to get to this point as our business has evolved, as we've understood more about our customers. And it is a constant dialogue between our CSM team, sales, and product. It's surprisingly hard to agree on phases and milestones, as I'll talk about as I go through our case study. But the important thing is to get started, because if you don't have a line in the sand or a baseline set of what you think your customers are doing, then you're definitely not going to be able to communicate and surface that to other stakeholders. So yeah, again, it's taken us a little while to get here, and it's still evolving. So we changed it again, I think, just last week, at least in the measurement part. So for us, onboarding starts with that critical handoff for sales. So if you're a high-touch, onboarding, direct sales-driven business, I think the first step is almost certainly going to be from direct sales. And we have a handoff form, actually very similar to what Brad was saying about the conditions for success. We established that through discovery, through the opportunity development, and then we carry that same document forward to the CSM team. But there's a couple other elements in the handoff form that the AE completes. Internally, we do have a lot of activities going on. ClientSuccess, we're a happy customer, and it's a really big help with this. So you can see some of these things. We have an internal opportunity meeting. So we've actually separated account management from CSM for various reasons, which I'm happy to talk about. And then a lot of operational tasks. So, our Skilljar organization, we use Zendesk for support. So we set up that organization right away so we can link all the ticket data back to our customer journey. Some of the, kind of administrative things about what did the customer buy, what package are they, and making sure that contract is part of ClientSuccess. From the customer perspective, really simple. There's just an email introduction made typically within 1 hour of signing. And in fact, we often set up that onboarding and kickoff call before we even sign the deal to make sure that handoff happens very seamlessly. And we have an SLA, service level agreement, of 1 day after closed won. So that's what I now look at. And if there's any customer that's more than 1 day and these things haven't been done, believe me, I am on the CSM team's case. So I'm, very data-driven engineer by background. Worked at Amazon for a long time. I fully believe if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And so fortunately, ClientSuccess helps out a lot here. We set up several kind of custom success cycles and date fields, and we run weekly reporting based on, status and time in each stage. So we happen to be a high-touch onboarding model. As I said, usually that first phase is going to be most likely a handoff from sales. If you're in a low-touch or freemium service, that handoff is probably from marketing, and it might be an activity like signing up for a free trial. And the interesting thing about this is I consider the customer journey separate from the revenue journey, and even though customer sometimes means paying customer, a lot of customer success starts before you even close the deal. So, in our case, and as I'll get into, we actually send a lot of our onboarding materials before the deal is won. And then for marketing-driven businesses, as soon as that customer enters your system, you should consider onboarding starting, because when they convert later and become a paying customer, while there's still more to be done there, their expectations have usually already been set from the moment they set up a trial. So for us, our second milestone is the kickoff, and we have a call as soon as possible with the key stakeholders. And we reconfirm those conditions for success and goals and strategy. And you might be like, okay, this is kind of obvious, but it's not. This is actually something I think we put in version 2 of onboarding. And the reason is, we have a cast of characters on the Skilljar side. We have a cast of characters on the customer side. This is often the point where the customer starts bringing in the stakeholders that were not involved in the decision but are important for success. So in our case, like a Salesforce admin, or the customer marketing person, or the web dev that's going to be working on the design. These are all people that are critical to the success of the project, but maybe don't even know that this project is happening, right? So it's really important on that kickoff call to make sure we align what success looks like at a meta level, not the tactical level, And then it's also surprising how much can be lost in translation between the AEs and the CSMs, even in a relatively small organization like ourselves. So our VP of sales is saying, like, every call is a discovery call. Like, from the first SCR touch to every, QBR, every call is an opportunity to reconfirm your goals and your strategy and what you're trying to achieve. And things change on the customer side all the time, too. So, they have a new initiative, they have new timelines. So it's always important to reconfirm that. So then we spend some time constructing and reviewing that onboarding plan so everyone's on the same page. How do we communicate? What's the project management style? What are the timelines? What are the implementation activities? Usually at this point, we send our Skilljar to prospects even before they've signed with us, but if they haven't gotten it already, this is really where we start pushing those self-service resources so they can get started with sort of the transactional tasks right away. And again, we use our ClientSuccess field to measure that call occurred. We aim for having it within 1 week of the contract signing. And usually this is just a scheduling issue because we do emphasize getting all the stakeholders on that call. So Kickoff, I think, might be unique to Hightouch Onboarding. Like I said, we didn't used to have this, or we had it sort of more as like the first product training session instead of just making a totally like strategic conversation. And this is something that we've put in with a lot of success. And I think it's also important when you do have multiple stakeholders to really understand those roles and responsibilities. So for us, our third phase is what we call soft launch. And Skilljar is a type of product that does have several moving pieces. So we have content, training content that either needs to be migrated or created in our system that has to be reviewed and tested. We have user experience, so is it paid training, free training, subscription, a la carte, instructor-led or on-demand, public or private. So there's a lot of like permutations of this, as well as the actual user experience of moving through the site and what's a bundle and that kind of thing. And then reviewing the data and integrations coming in. So Salesforce, Marketo, we have a BI connector. Sometimes that doesn't get into the soft launch, but there's a lot of moving pieces. It's not just like swiping your credit card and turning it on. And this was a little bit of a learning milestone for us too. We didn't used to track this. But now, we actually think of this as first value, and our goal is to get customers here as quickly as possible and not wait for perfection. I'd say, probably 25% of our customers really try to wait for perfection, and so we really have to push them and say, like, hey, in our experience, like, X, Y, and Z can happen when, you wait for this perfect thing. Or like, usually it's feedback and content, which is like totally outside of our control, but as a result, we really push them to kind of multi-thread the different parts of what it takes to be successful. And going back to those conditions for success, I love that phrase, and being like, okay, you're trying to do this by Y, like, let's get this out there, let's take an iterative approach. And in between kickoff and soft launch, I'm skipping a lot of key activities here, but we're doing a lot around implementation and migration and training, and with the goal of getting customers to that soft launch as quickly as possible. And I think milestones are a way to measure the progress of onboarding and actively guide our customers to a successful state. I mean, we actually share a lot of these milestones with our customers, be like, here's what it takes for our best customers to be successful, and it's actually remarkable. Some customers are like, let me just follow your best practices. Like, give me your project plan. I'll do everything you say. And then there are other ones that really kind of like want to take their own speed to doing things. And, we try to like accommodate both. But at this point, like we really know what works. And so, but every company and every customer is different. So you do have to work with the realities of what their culture is like. And so, one challenge is measuring soft launch. And there's a little bit of subjectivity in this when ideally there wouldn't be for us. What helps is it's definitely a milestone in the customer's mind, and part of why we put in this milestone explicitly is because the majority of our customers do want some kind of soft launch or beta stage. And so either it's part of the project plan and we know it happened or not, or sometimes we actually see like they're so excited they actually start releasing it to all their usually internal stakeholders or friendly stakeholders, and we'll see the usage rising in the product. And so our CSMs are responsible for putting this date in, and we measure against this on a weekly basis as well. So our final phase is launch, and we call this the marketed launch or the full launch, when our customers open the floodgates to their intended trading audience. and a migration, if there is one, is fully complete. And this is when customers are really seeing that initial value that's stated with their initial launch goals. And it's actually surprising the end of onboarding is trickier to define than you might imagine. So let's take an example of a free product. Is it when somebody's entered their credit card? If you're looking at selling on Amazon Marketplace, is it when you've created a seller account? Is it when you've put up your first item for sale? Is it when you've actually made your first sale? We define it as putting your first item for listing, by the way. I would suggest thinking about this from the customer perspective. Again, disconnected from revenue. When has your customer achieved what they originally bought your product for? Like initial value, like we're not going into sort of long-term value here, but when are they starting to see the results that they originally bought your product for? Let's take the example of Slack. I assume most of us are familiar with Slack. I'm guessing the end of onboarding is not sending your first message or even putting in your credit card. I mean, we're like 50 people and we're still not paying for Slack. I'm speculating here, but I would guess the end of onboarding for a product like that is probably getting all of the team members or company members accepting their invite and communicating on a daily basis. So, again, I'm blurring the lines between what's pre-sale and post-sale and who's a prospect and who's a customer, but the customer journey is very fluid and continuous now, and onboarding, I think, should be thought of the same way. So I hope that's helpful for how at least we at Skilljar think about our onboarding milestones and measurement, how you might apply a similar framework to your own journey. And again, I'm happy to talk about this after the presentation with anybody interested. So next, we're going to go to some tactics for success. So things you can actually do at your organizations to proactively impact customer success, not just measure it, not just get more analytics. What can you do to actually impact change? And if we go back to that cooking model, the tactics are really going to align with your onboarding model, but you have to remember, and this is now the CEO speaking, it's not just what your customer wants, but also what's practical from a cost and margin perspective. So in self-service, people often call this tech touch. You are looking for as much of a tech-driven workflow as possible. And often this can be done just through pure product exploration. Again, we see this a lot in consumer and developer-oriented products. That email welcome series, very, very common. So welcome email, 7-day trip, 14-day trip. If you want to get a little fancy, you can trigger those messages based on certain activities in the product. But there's email saturation these days, so I would advise against relying on this solely for successful onboarding. And self-service knowledge bank, so great documentation, letting customers help themselves to the extent possible. So in low touch, you start seeing the one-to-many approaches and a little bit more complexity. So on-demand training, great tool for this. Skilljar, it's certainly a pain point that we solve for our customers, especially when they have a global 24/7 customer base. In-app guidance, so there's a number of vendors out there that do the kind of walkthrough around the screen. So great for simple kind of product usability questions. Community, so if your customer base is large enough and engaged enough, you can have your customers help each other. And this does require some staffing and moderation on your end, as well as significant size and customers who are actually online. And then one-to-many webinars. So this is something we're seeing more of sort of like a group office hours. I think HubSpot actually does this to great success. They collect a whole bunch of their customers and put them on a single kind of office hours around a similar topic. Again, a way to reach kind of many customers in a low-touch manner. So in high touch, you really start layering in those human connections, one-on-one customer interactions. And on the training perspective, you might have instructor-led training, custom training, either virtual or on-site. You might have a dedicated implementation team, project management that is focused on the onboarding experience itself. And so remember, going back to segmentation, many companies have customers of all types. So you'll likely be offering tactics from each of these buckets, and that's totally okay. Just remember, align what your customer wants and behaves with the type of product you have. Usually, I think I see companies that are like too high touch when their customer really wants to, they want to get started right away. So congratulations, we've come to the end of onboarding, and you've nailed that handoff, implementation's going great, your customer's about to launch. As customer success leaders, is our job done? Well, before you get too excited, remember this. So account onboarding is not the same as user onboarding. So despite everything I've just gone over in the last 25 minutes, companies have a natural tendency to think of onboarding for a new logo or new account. But hey, we're customer success professionals, and customer success is continuous. And think about it. How many of your users on day one, how many of them are going to be in the same role a year from now? 75%? 50%? How about 2 years from now? I mean, you might have 100% turnover of your user base in an account. And the scary thing is, as CS leaders, your team might not even know about it because there isn't an instrumented path from sales or marketing the way I've kind of structured this whole presentation. And I do think I call this continuous onboarding, and it's probably the subject for an entirely separate 30-minute presentation. But the quick things I'll share is I think the most proactive customer success teams, they are constantly triggering these low-touch and self-service workflows, and that trigger is not from marketing and sales, but from product. And so when you see new user accounts being created, you trigger one of those low-touch workflows, trigger one of those self-service workflows. So, I think we as customer success professionals have enough issues with onboarding for new logos, but that's not the end of the journey, it's just the beginning. So to sum up the last 30 minutes, 5 takeaways. I love slides like this. Poor onboarding, the leading cause of churn. So if you're not measuring, thinking about it, getting kind of CSAT or some metrics on this, you should be. 3 different customer onboarding models: self-service, low-touch, high-touch. Think about what's appropriate for your customer, product, and business. Define your milestones and measurements. So I sometimes think we're going overkill on this versus our stage of company, but that's the only way I can operate. Especially at this point, I know 80% of our customer accounts super well, but there's definitely customers that, as a CEO, I have never even engaged with, and I need to know that they're being taken care of and tracking towards success. Choose the tactics that are aligned with your onboarding model. And then finally, remember that onboarding is a continuous process. It's a constant journey of customer education, customer value, adoption, and success. So I'll wrap up with this quote from Donald Porter. He was the VP of, customer experience, customer service at British Airways. Customers don't expect you to be perfect. They do expect you to fix things when they go wrong. We're all human. We're working with humans. That personal relationship does matter. If you think back to that escalation I started with at the beginning of this presentation, the good news is there's still a customer. They, in fact, expanded, 25%-ish with us last year. And in fact, our champion there was so excited by the product that he's actually now joined our team. So some negative onboarding experiences do have happy endings. So thank you.